All right, so my name is Christopherleonjohnson. So I'm have here Mrs. Kelly Klingman. She's run for city council in the 22nd district, which covers Astoria and Astoria.
Astoria, East Elmhurst, little parts of Jackson Heights, and Woodside, and then we also have Rikers Island.
All right, cool. So the people want to know why you're running for city council.
I'm running for city council because I love Astoria. I love New York City. I have kids that are growing up in Astoria, and it's just, we've seen the rise in crime. We've seen, the city just deteriorating. And Tiffany Caban runs our district, and the more I learned about who's representing us in city council, the more driven I was to go out and fight against her, because we had such amazing leadership with Peter Vallone Sr., Peter Vallone Jr., and now it feels like the district doesn't have the right voice that's really encompassing of all the people, and she's not accessible, and the whole community feels like it's time to go out there and make a change.
So I want to bring up this thing about this controversy that's happening right now with her constituent services situation. I think you heard the news about her office being closed. She's saying that she allegedly said that, it's under construction, it's doing this and that, but it's been a lot of people that's on the internet that's doing they snooping, and they find out that there's no construction permits and etc. So how you feel about that? About her office not open for the people?
She's not accessible. That's what I hear. I go to a lot of community board meetings. I go to a lot of police meetings. They do a community watch meeting one Tuesday a month for the NYPD, and she's not there. She's nowhere. I don't see her out in the community. I know that there's other councilwomen like Vicky Palladino. Her office is completely open. She does pop-ups in different parts of the district so that she's available, and she's listening to all the constituents and going and fighting for the things that the people in her district really need. Vicky Palladino comes to our district more than I see Tiffany Caban, and that's not even her district. Helping us with the DA, helping us get programs that are helping, some of the harassment going on with some of the local businesses.
So I want to speak as constituent services. There's a thing that's going on in her district where she's only serving a certain few. Tiffany Caban is not really dealing with certain people. She's only dealing with the people that's getting in her office. How you feel about that? And you would be different if you ever take her defeats her in November?
I agree with you. I think that's what's happening in politics everywhere. It's an us versus them situation now. It's either you're for this, and then if you're for this, you're against that. And that's not the way to govern at all. I feel like there's a huge swath of people in Astoria. We have many different nationalities. We have many different reasons why people live there, different walks of life. We have people that grew up there, been there for 50, 60 years, and then we have a new generation of people moving into the neighborhood. And it's like you have to represent everybody, and you have to work together. We have problems with bicycles and pedestrian safety, and it's not just, it's a DOT problem and we're going to leave the NYPD out because we don't like the NYPD. That doesn't work. You need the NYPD to work with the DOT to make everyone safe in the community. We're dealing with mopeds. I'm scared to step out my door sometimes because we have moped issue, we have bicycle issue, we have cars that are driving like crazy. We have a lot of the incidents that happened. We had a 7-year-old girl get hit by a car, and the woman driving the car she had a learner's permit. And then we also had an incident where a pedestrian was killed on a bicycle, a 14-year-old boy, and he was also killed by somebody who was driving a car that didn't have a license. So you have a DOT problem, and then you also have an NYPD problem. And we need to work together.
Speaking of NYPD, there's a thing about Tiffany Caban that people say that she's soft on crime. How you feel about that? How she has the most controversial anti-police policies in the city council, as she's advocated for abolishing the police, defunding the police, closing Rikers, every bill you could think of in the state chambers, such as elder parole. How you feel about her policies about crime and how she's approaching the crime issue with these so-called like unrealistic soft solutions?
I completely oppose them. Like I said, you need to work together. Our NYPD needs support. I understand there's bad apples everywhere. There are human beings as well. But besides that, they need not just support, but they need encouragement to do their job. They need the resources. They need the community support behind them. I know that I ride the subways every day, all day long, because I work in real estate. I'm in Brooklyn. I'm in the Bronx. I'm in Harlem. I'm all over the city. Since Adams had put more police on the trains, it has felt so much better. it through COVID, after COVID, even during the later years of de Blasio, the subways were getting less and less safe. You need to work with the police officers. You need to encourage them. You need to empower them. You need to give them the resources they need.
So speaking of resources, how you feel about Tiffany Gabon advocating for removing money from the NYPD, removing from the Department of Corrections, and funneling into nonprofits just as the CLT NYC and Vocal New York? How you feel about that? And we'll get into some of us after Vocal New York after your answer if you want to.
Yeah, I mean, I need to really understand what the nonprofits do more before I can comment on the money being funneled to them. However, my point is that you shouldn't be taking from one allocation and moving to another. There has to be a way to balance resources and make sure that the community is served in every single way.
So speaking of one nonprofit, Vocal New York, I think you heard the controversy of Vocal New York and how Tiffany Gabon was silent about this. In December of last year, 2022, there's a person that works for Vocal New York. He's an advocate for Vocal named Douglas Powell, and he made some disparaging comments about Asian people. You know, we have an issue with Asian hate in New York City, and stop Asian hashtag stop Asian hate, hashtag stop AAPI hate. He made some disparaging comments about Yatin Chu. He made some disparaging comments about Susan Lee, because they was going against Intro 632, and we'll get to this after this question. Mm-hmm. So how you feel about that, when controversy that happened in the city council?
Well, I think that's terrible. I think nothing should be supported that increases hate in these communities, especially like she's went and stormed the Rent Guidelines Board with other members of the city council that voted against Jewish hate, a bill that would do a National Jewish Hate Day to bring awareness to anti-Semitism. And I know Tiffany Gabon, she didn't vote against that. However, she was still with the same people storming the Rent Guidelines Board when they were talking about communities for the affordability.
Speaking of Jewish hate, I know you're Jewish, and how you feel about, there's a few council members that said that they voted no for the bill because the people that was behind the bill was right wing. Mm-hmm. Councilman Shahana Hanif made that comment saying that the person that introduced the bill, in inverted called, is a right winger and who was against the vaccine mandates. How you feel about that?
I think labeling people is the problem in our society. Labeling somebody as an anti-vax person, or labeling somebody as, Jewish, or labeling somebody as, it's racist. It doesn't. That to me is kind of the worst reason to not support a bill. It makes no sense to me.
So I want to, speaking of that, how you feel about like Charles Barron bring up the situation about how Palestine, etc. Like, how you feel about that? He's saying like, well, Jewish people don't fight for Palestinian rights, so I'm not going to vote for I'm going to abstain from the bill. How you feel about that?
Well, first of all, I'm not Jewish. My ex-husband is Jewish. I'm not Jewish. I do have a Jewish last name, so people do assume that. But anti-Semitism is on the rise, and rhetoric like that is just, it's appalling. We need to have conversations and not stir the pot.
So going back to this, we're going to talk about this introduction bill. I think since you're real estate, you know about this a little more. Mm-hmm. It's called Intro 632. Is sponsored by Key Powers. Mm-hmm. It was sponsored the year prior in 2021 by Stephen Levin, who's no longer the council member. He's replaced by Lincoln Wrestler. So I wonder how you feel about this bill, Intro 632, about the thing is they want to allow people with criminal records to live next to people without being vetted. So if you decide to say, if we don't want you because you get a criminal record, the person has right to sue the real estate agency or the landlord because they won't rent to them because they criminal record.
Correct.
Yeah.
So again, you can't have a one-size-fits-all bill for the communities here. We have many landlords in our district that are opposed to having that legislation, and it makes sense. A lot of our landlords also, they live in their house, and to have that, you can't do criminal background checks. That should be, I'm against it for a couple different reasons. I'd like to talk to you more about it, but for my district, it is not something that works.
So how you feel about, with the current Intro 632, there was a rally that happened the same day as the hearing of the same time that Douglas Powell made those disparaging comments about Asians. Mm-hmm. So there's one council member that serves uptown Manhattan named Carmen De La Rosa. Mm-hmm. She's a former state assembly member. she mentioned that the GOP is the biggest advocates against the Intro 632 bill, which was real ironic because there was Democrats and Republicans that was at a rally the day prior hosted by Susan Lee, who's running for city council in New York District 1. Susan Lee, she's running against Christopher Marte, who's pro defunding police. He's pro everything. He's part of the Progressive Caucus. So how you feel about that type of notion that the people that oppose Intro 632 are just Republicans, etc.?
Well, you just said it. It was a bipartisan agreement.
Yeah,
it's not just Republicans.
Yeah.
You just validated that
and
point.
How you feel about the people that are for Intro 632 saying that the people that are against it are racist and divisive?
I think that is the biggest problem in our government, and people are tired of it. I think people are tired of that being the rhetoric. I think people want to come together. The city is facing so much crisis. We do not want to just sit there and watch our politicians yell at each other and point fingers and blame. We want to come together as a city. We want to fix the problems that are here. And for me, it's like, this is no time for hate. There's a lot of problems going on in the city, and it's no time for all this hateful rhetoric, calling people racist. We need to come across the aisle. We need to tone down the rhetoric. We have a lot of issues that are facing the city today, and that's why I want to go into City Hall.
Thank you. And I want to know what you're feeling about Intro 97, because that's a slept-on bill. It's a controversial bill. It's a lot of opposition from the moderates and the Republicans. So can you educate the people about Intro 97 since you're a real estate broker?
Local Law 97 was done in 2019 with Mayor de Blasio, and it's part of a larger Green New Deal sort of project. And it affects about 800,000 co-ops and condominium owners throughout the city. And they're usually the older co-op buildings, lower price points, and now they want them to renovate to a higher green energy standard. And the cost to do that, especially now with inflation, is astronomical. So it will inadvertently affect these homeowners on their maintenance. It could double, triple, because that cost will get shared by all the homeowners in the projects. And that also causes a problem with affordability. So say you are a co-op owner and you rent out at an affordable rent to the community. A lot of, like, if you live in Forest Hills, you live in Astoria, you live in, other parts of Queens, the rents are much more attractive than if you live in Manhattan. But now that co-op owner, instead of that $2,000 a month that they might be charging, covering, what they need to maintain their home, is now going to be $4,000 a month because their maintenance is going to skyrocket. And there's no incentive on the back end to say, okay, you're going to have to take all this cost, and now we're not going to incentivize you on taxes or help you or make it affordable for you to do these changes to your building. And so Vicky Palladino is trying to pass a law now, legislation to stop it, at least for a little bit of time, until they can work out some of these issues for these 800,000 co-op and condo owners in the city.
So how you feel about, there's a situation that's going on in New York City about good cause eviction and how that's going to affect the small landlord. How you feel about that?
It does affect the small landlord. That's why it was very discouraging for people in our district who are a lot of small landlords. They're middle-class family landlords. They're minority owner family landlords. And our district is full of them. And the reason why Astoria was always affordable is because you have these small-time landlords that they're middle-class families. They're doing what they can to keep their community safe and affordable. And she, instead of having conversations with them about how the rent regulations guidelines board was working on, what the landlords need plus what the rents need, she stormed the rent guidelines board, wants rent rollbacks, wants not being able to evict your tenants if you're a single family and you rely on that income to live in the house is a problem.
So speaking of that bill, there's two members of the state Senate, both of them Democratic Socialists.
Yeah.
One name is Jabari Brisport. He serves Bed-Stuy, the 26th district.
Yeah.
And there's another one that I think you know about her. Her name is Julia Salazar.
Yes.
Speaking of those two, they mocked recently. I think like last year, they mocked the small landlords because they was opposing the bill on Twitter and social media, and they had a nerve to mock them. How you feel about that? They're mocking small landlords, saying that, well, you guys need to just handle yourself and don't put the burden on the people.
I think the problem is New York is served with 51 districts, and they're all different. And Astoria, that is a district that has, just for example, I live in a house. I rent. I don't own the house. My landlord parents live downstairs. They bought the house in 1964. They're in their late 80s. My landlord, I think, is turning 90 this year. They're on a very fixed income. It costs a lot to maintain the house. They have to heat the house. They have to deal with the house itself was built in like 1929. So they're difficult houses to maintain. And they're on a fixed income. And so my rent, when I live on the second floor, helps take care of them. And I think that when you look at it more as a community, and you look at it more as how are we serving Astoria, it will make sense. But if you're looking at a whole city and you're saying every single home landlord, every single small landlord is a slumlord or isn't, they just want money, or that's an incorrect way to look at anything. And as far as my district is concerned, I think the landlords and the tenants, it's something that can be worked together. And it shouldn't be a one policy fits all.
So we're going back to crime. How you feel about Tiffany Gabon pushing for elder parole? She's saying that we need to, if somebody gets life in prison and they serve 15 years, and after 15 years, say they serve life without parole, and they serve 15 years, and they reach 55 years old, they can be eligible for parole because they did 15 years, they're 55. How you feel about that bill? It's a controversial bill in the city, in the state of SIP, and Tiffany Gabon is the biggest proponent for that. Even she's city council. How you feel about that?
Well, she has a criminal, she has a criminal justice background, and I have to be honest, like, she probably sees things in a different way than I would see things. I think that something like that is, a lot of the stuff that she pushes for is dangerous, especially closing Rikers Island. I mean, the other thing too, you have 39 members of the city council vote to start to close Rikers Island. And what's more controversial for me is that they're eliminating prosecutors and judges in that decision. What they're doing is they're going to create, I think, $3 million to pay for a task force that's going to make up of social workers and I think social workers and another type of group to go in and determine whether those prisoners should be released.
Yeah, so speaking of crime, how you feel about raise the age? She's a big proponent of raise the age. These bills are state. She's a big proponent. She's like a big supporter and one of the biggest advocates for these bills, especially like raise the age. How you feel about raise the age?
So there's a lot of teen crime. I don't know if you've noticed, but we've noticed.
Yeah.
And it's my children are becoming teenagers soon, and it's almost like if there isn't programs in place to take care of the teen violence, and then you have raised the age, it's what are we doing with our children? We're just letting them go out and commit crimes and not be, helped or corrected. It's a much bigger problem, and we're seeing a rise in teen violence. And we had actually, we're having problems in Astoria. There's a McDonald's on 31st Street that now has a sign that says you cannot enter this McDonald's unless you are accompanied by an adult if you are under 18. And we have a bouncer outside the McDonald's because the teen crime is on the rise. And I don't know if it's directly reflected to the raise the age, but there has to be some conversation about it, and we have to start tackling it because it's not fair to our kids. It's not fair to the teenagers. It really isn't. I wouldn't want my teenage son, when he's older, to be put in a position where it is easier and cooler for him to run with the gang than to, be a productive member of society.
So speaking of that, I want to know how you feel about bail reform, because she is a big proponent for bail reform. She's like the biggest advocate of bail reform in the city council.
Yes.
How do you feel about that?
Well, there were 365, I don't know if that's the exact number, but around there, that are responsible in the shoplifting sector for 60,000 crimes. 365 people responsible for 60,000 crimes because of bail reform. There have been some, from what I understand from Melinda Katz, the district attorney, she did do a great presentation on how they have made some changes with second offenders. And so now they are able to prosecute if you're a second offender on a shoplifting case, but it's a big problem.
So speaking of crime, I know you have George Grasso here right now.
Yeah.
So how you feel about crime? If we could grab him, how you feel about crime, about the district attorney race? How you feel about that?
I feel like I support Melinda Katz.
Yeah.
I feel like she's doing a lot for the district. She's doing a lot for the community, and I feel like Queens is we're very lucky to have her. So she's advocating for programs in Astoria to help the local businesses. She's coming up with trespass affidavits. She's working with the community to figure out a way to prosecute crime.
Yeah.
And that's given the challenges that are coming from the state with the bail reform, she's at least saying, okay, well, we have these limitations on us from the state. What can we do now? What programs can we have to go into the Astoria houses to help with the gangs, to help with the shoplifting crime, to help with local businesses that have kids trespassing in front of their stores, to remove it from the responsibility of the people that work there. And that's the opposite of what I hear the rhetoric is. It's like, well, we're going to have, we're going to train the people that work at the CVS to de-escalate somebody who comes in. That is a recipe for disaster.
So I want to know about, speaking of child mental health. Let's talk about mental health. Recently, there was a case about Jordan Neely. He passed away. I don't know if you want to give your opinion about this, but how you feel about that, about mental health and etc.
He was on a list. He was like the top 50 of people that were watching him, saying that he needed help. So, the one thing that AOC did say correctly is that the city did fail him, but it's her policies that are failing him. We had, I was talking to somebody yesterday. I believe there's something like 16 hospitals closed during the Bloomberg administration. Nobody's talking about hospitals.
Mm-hmm.
We have not replenished those hospitals. I live in Queens. We have Elmhurst Hospital and we have Mount Sinai Queens, and I know they're overcrowded, and I know people who would rather, if there's an emergency, drive an hour, get into the Queens traffic, and go to Cornell to be serviced instead of going to Elmhurst or going to Mount Sinai. So, and those are city-run hospitals. So there needs to be a conversation about hospitals, more beds for the mentally ill, more infrastructure regarding our public health. We talk about healthcare, but we don't talk about the lack of healthcare providers we now have in the city and the lack of beds we have to help these people, and it's a shame.
All right, I want to know how you feel about this situation that's, speaking of mental health and etc., how you feel about people, they say that the people that's backing Daniel Penny are just Republicans and they're just right-wingers. How you feel about that? Like, is it, what's your take about that? Because she might attack you about that. How you feel about that? I know, yeah, I know. So we got some more questions and we'll be done. So let me ask two more. Two more things is kind of tough if you want to answer or not. Mm-hmm. So how you feel about Juan Ardilla situation? What's your take about that before we? Juan Ardilla, the situation that he's been accused of being assaulting two women in the city council in his past.
I'm not familiar with that.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah. And one more thing about before we end this off about. Akeem Browder. A lot of people asking the people who are running against Timmy Bond about Akeem Browder. Akeem Browder donated $75 to her campaign for re-election, and she. So I want to know how you feel about that, like what you and how you feel about her doing allegedly PDA with this guy outside City Hall steps.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, how you feel about that?
Yeah, no, people are upset. It's upsetting, But did she know that he was a convicted sex offender? Yeah, it's upsetting.
So let's end this up because about another rally soon. So what's your final message to the people? Like, let's bring it home. What's your final message?
My final message to the people is I am just a normal person. I'm a regular person. I have a great job. I have 2 kids. I love my community. I love my city. To be forced into the public eye like this is almost, it's so necessary because we need more people to rise up and to understand what's going on in the government, to understand how City Hall works, to understand how you can really help your communities, and I'm doing this not just for me and not just for the community, but I'm doing this so that everybody in the city maybe will get into some encouragement to go out there and try to make a difference. And it is hard and it is scary, and I will tell you, I throw up a lot in the morning because it's something that's so new, but it feels so necessary. And I'm not doing this for me. I'm doing this for the city that I just love and the community that I love.
So thank you so much for this interview. I appreciate your time, and great success to your campaign in November. Make sure you vote for Klingman in November over Timmy Gabon. This is the full interview, uncut, and stay blessed, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Let me just turn this off.